Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to show you one of my favorite books, it's called Norwood or Village Life in New England. It's by Henry Ward Beecher. Beecher was a Congregationalist minister in New York in the time of the Civil War, and this book was originally written as a serial story and published in the newspaper, and it was afterwards published as a book. Yeah, so it was originally published in the New York Ledger as a serial story. This edition I have here is from 1868, which always makes me very happy when I find old original copies like that. 1868. Another cool thing about it is, let's see if I can show you here. You can see the binding is coming apart here. And a common thing that they did in those days was to use the pages from older books as part of the binding in the new books they were making. So in the spine of this book, we have a page from an old Bible, the book of the Acts of the Apostles. You can read it a little bit here. They were turned back by the Spirit. They were restrained from preaching the gospel. So that's kind of an extra fun thing about this book. So the story of Norwood is about two families in a small New England village. It begins with the parents settling in the village earlier in the late 18th, early 19th century, and then it continues on with their children, Barton and Rose, and it walks through their coming of age, basically, in the years leading up to the Civil War, and then during the Civil War. It's written in the style of a Bildungsroman, which was a German genre that focused on the character development of the people in the story. So it's not so much a event-driven book as it is an inner character development, introspective story about two young people and their lives growing up in a small New England village, facing the Civil War, and then finding their purpose in life and their full adult development. So it is one of my favorite books. I have read it many times. I try to keep my old copy here safe and read it gently because I love reading the original copies much better than reprints. Let me see if I can just find a little excerpt here to read for you. Let's see here. Okay, I'll read this excerpt here. So in this excerpt, Rose's brother Arthur has just been killed in the first battle of the war, and the family is at home talking about it. "I think," said Mrs. Wentworth, this is Rose's mother, "that one is shielded by mourning costume from careless inquiries and from unfeeling intrusion of people." "No doubt," said her husband, "in a few instances this may be true, but the advantage at best is slight. Well-meaning blunderers are not to be cured so easily." "But I think, my dear," replied Mrs. Wentworth, "that it is congenial to one's feelings, in a great sorrow, to avoid bright colors and to be clothed in darker ones. That is a matter of education. In so far as high colors have come to signify gaiety and pleasure, there may be a good reason for dismissing them. If one would mark one's grief, why not by the color chosen by the Bible to express spiritual things? White signifies purity, triumph, spiritual gladness, and this ought not to be uncongenial to the moods of Christian grief." "And yet in the public mind," said his daughter, Mrs. Rose, "there is a seeming want of respect to the memory of the departed, if we make no difference in our ways. It is not the custom of our people to symbolize their feelings by a change of dress, with this solitary exception. If a man becomes bankrupt, or has his house burned down, or loses heavily in commercial operations, or has a son in disgrace, or a child misled by evil company, or any other experience of grief, he does not change his garb. The one solitary and exceptional case is bereavement. There is in domestic sorrow a delicacy, or ought to be, which should shrink from having an ostentatiousness such as mourning apparel cannot fail to have. No one has a right so to express his sorrows as to intrude them upon every eye wherever he goes. So here they're talking about the custom of wearing black for mourning, and they are discussing how it is more fitting for Christians who believe in the resurrection and in eternal life to wear white to signify joy. Okay, let me read you one more excerpt from During the War, which is my favorite section of the book. Okay, I'll read this section. This is when Rose has just received word that Barton is believed dead, and she is talking with Barton's sister Alice, and Alice is mourning for her sweetheart, who has just been killed, and she has just found him in the woods, as she and Rose are both following the armies as army nurses. So, let's see. Something disquieted Hiram Beers this morning. He had little to say and seemed fidgety. He picked up things only to lay them down, and worked without any purpose. At last he gave way. "'Tain't no use, Rose. You may as well know it first as last. I've got a letter for you from Barton, and I expect it's the last that you'll ever get from him." Rose stopped, and raising herself to her full height, looked fixedly and even commandingly upon Hiram. "Hiram, has Barton fallen?" "I don't know. I'm afraid so. I can't find nothing of him. Pete's gone. Nobody's seen him today. Barton's officers say they saw him fall in a charge yesterday, and that he didn't come back with his men, and that he must be dead. But we've hunted everywhere for his body and can't find it. I was up there the night before the last battle. He said something would happen to him in that fight. He felt it. He told me to wait till he wrote this letter. If he got it safe, I was to bring it back to him. But if he was killed, I was to give it to you." Rose took the letter and read. "I have a presentiment, Rose, that something will befall me tomorrow. If you receive these lines, I shall have fallen, and my words will be forgiven as of one dead. Rose, I have vainly tried to conquer that love which has so taken possession of my life as to overcome all other feelings. As early as I can remember, I loved you. It has grown with my manhood. It is a part of my being. Not to love you would be not to be myself. When I told you all this on leaving home, I had hoped for some sympathy. I pled for only a word. My letter was not answered or noticed. Perhaps your silence was best. It was hard to bear. If I could have ceased loving, I could have conquered the pain that refusal which you gave by silence. It will not be a trouble to you any longer to know that a heart has loved you beyond every other thing. My latest, strongest feeling, Rose, is love for you. My last wishes and prayers invoke blessings on you. I go toward darkness, but there is a light beyond. In heaven, O Rose, in heaven I shall meet you, and say I love you, without fear or repulse. Barton Cathcart. Rose stood silent and motionless. Amazement, sorrow, and joy filled her heart. She whispered to herself, "He loved me. He loved me always, best, to the last. He told me of it. When? What letter? There has been some dreadful mistake. This is his writing. This is Barton's writing. And here it is written down. My latest, strongest feeling, Rose, is love for you. And he will never know that I loved him more. Noble soul, if thou art in heaven, God will tell thee how thou art loved. And he wrote to me. Wrote to tell me this when first leaving Norwood? Where is that treacherous letter that did not fulfill its message?" Rose called to Alice. There was something in her manner so high and commanding that Alice scarcely believed that this was Rose. She had never seen her in such a mood of exaltation. "Alice, my sister, Barton has left us." Alice could not look paler than she already was, but a ghastly ashen hue came over the white of her fair face. "Read this, Alice. Can you not? Let me read it to you." With a firm, low voice, Rose read every word without faltering. Barton's words of love seemed to inspire her soul. There was a triumph in the greatest of her tones that showed that sorrow had in it an overmastering joy. Alice looked upon Rose with wonder. In a low and solemn way, with a wondering, inquiring look, she said, "I cannot understand you. It all seems dreadful to me. God is full of anger towards us both. Alice, God loves us both. Oh, I know not what joy that would have been of loving had Barton lived and loved me, since even in death his love is so full of joy and thrilling. I am more glad than sorrowful. He loved me always, loved me to the end. My heart sings, only my eyes weep. Come, Alice, let not people see us. They walked along to the edge of the woods. Again the little birds were singing, the melancholy pewee, the pine warbler, and the vireo. They came to Hayward's grave. The sun shone brightly upon it. Already someone had transplanted from the edges of the wood clumps of flowers. Poor Alice, tears running down her cheeks, turned to Rose. "Oh, Rose, tell me how to feel as you do. My heart was sunk so low that there is no more light for me. I have envied the dead around me. I want to go. God does not love me enough to let me die." So as you can see, it is very introspective, and it is also written in a way that is now currently considered often to be sentimental or unrealistic, which is two criticisms that I personally hate, because I don't believe that writing towards an ideal and expressing an ideal is unrealistic. I very much enjoy a statement by the German philosopher Georg Hegel, who wrote that if we have knowledge of something, that means that it is within on this side of consciousness. So in other words, he is stating that if we have awareness of a limitation or of an ideal, that means that we unconsciously know that we can go beyond the limit that we perceive, because we see that it is a limit, so we are aware of something beyond it. And if we can express an ideal, we are capable of that ideal. So I very much encourage you to keep that in mind when you approach literature from this period, and understand that beauty as well as ugliness and hate and all the dark sides of human nature, the beauty and the goodness and the inspiration and the ideals are just as true, and they can be found in works like this and appreciated without getting hung up on whether it is what currently a lot of people consider realistic, which again, I hate that word. So this is Norwood by Henry Ward Beecher, one of my favorite works, and if you have access to it, I encourage you to go find it and read it and enjoy it and get some of the inspiration out of it that I have, hopefully. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video.